Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the front room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we've got more Bears news. Opening day for baseball is right around the corner. Some hopefully positivity for the Blackhawks and Rambler up. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. Less than 90 minutes from the city limits, and affordable fun for the whole family. Only a few games left in the season, so make sure you head on over to icehogs.com. Get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more, and tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, we are in Chicago in Rambler fever.
Yes, we are, and every win just creates more and more excitement.
I had no idea who Sister Jean was before like 2 weeks ago, and she's my favorite person on earth right now.
Oh, she's amazing. I think that it's so awesome that they interview her before and after games, especially after yesterday, because that was an unexpected game. I thought they'll give them a good fight, but I didn't think they were going to blow them out.
Everything about this run has just been so incredibly cool. I mentioned this before, as I'm a DePaul alum, and I came basically Tom Kleinschmidt's last year was the year before I started. So I started immediately after the Tom Kleinschmidt era, and I was there during the Jermaine Watts, marijuana arrest era. And so I'm always a little bit sour when there's, UIC is good or Loyola is good or any of the area schools are good because DePaul's not good. But I've had a really hard time not enjoying this Loyola team. They're just a really fun team to watch. And I don't know how you can hate on them.
No, this is honestly a lot more fun, in my opinion, than the Northwestern thing last year. I mean, it was cool to see them do what they did, but at the same time, I guess this is probably coming from an Illini fan, so my feelings towards Northwestern are a little different towards Loyola. I just felt like, and I know people are going to disagree with me, this is just my opinion, I felt like because we were in Chicago, there was this kind of Northwestern attitude where like, oh, you're in Chicago, you have to root for us in the tournament. I just feel like with this, it's so easy to root for these guys, and they are pretty humble about it too. Like the Sister Jean thing, that makes it all the more special. But this is a team they're going out there. It's a team effort. They're not acting as major underdogs. They're not being like, oh, we're small, but we shall. They're just going out there and doing it. And that's what I really like about it. And again, this is no disrespect to what Northwestern did last year. It was a really, really good thing for much of Chicago to see it. But I just feel like this bandwagon for me is easier to get on.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like, I don't know, with Northwestern, I feel like you either have to be on or you have to be off of the bandwagon.
Yeah.
But Loyola, it feels like an easy transition to get on. Like they built some very shallow steps to climb up into it, and they got comfy seats on the bandwagon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people like Sister Jean and just kind of the type of team they have, it's almost like you can't help but be pulled in because of that. And it's not like being forced in. It's just like you like that so much that you just kind of want to be part of it.
And I also love because it just busted everybody's brackets really hard.
And you know what? To me, it's okay. It busted my brackets, but it was worth it. It's not like I had any money on it.
Yeah, I'm okay with it because I was like, I'm in 2 different $10 pools, but I'm okay with losing $10 because to see Loyola, go to the championship game.
Yeah, it's going to be something that's going to be talked about for a long time, especially in this city. I actually have a cousin at Loyola, and he said that every day in this tournament, campus has just been so incredibly behind this team. They go crazy in the student section, like the lounge where you could watch everything. Like it's kind of a similar phenomenon when you see them win. It was like seeing the reactions when like the Cubs won the World Series of people going crazy and throwing like champagne and beer everywhere. It's what you're seeing with Loyola, and it makes you just feel like it means something more to the city than just, like winning in a tournament. It's kind of I don't know if unifying is the right word, but it creates like another positive among Chicagoans when sports right now has just been kind of bad until baseball season starts again. So it's just really kind of a positive thing for sports fans and maybe even some non-sports fans in Chicago coming together to root for.
And I don't know. I mean, ratings may prove me wrong, but I just feel like at this point in the the March Madness that you get, the beginning, everybody's just excited because they like upsets and they like, watching the exciting basketball schools they've never seen before. And then as you get further along in the tournament, there's the casual observer starts to drop off because they're like, whatever. Now the teams that are supposed to win are winning. But I feel like this keeps the casual fans around.
Absolutely.
Because you've got a team in Villanova who has, the last several years has been either won the championship or been right there. You've got Kansas, who seems like they win all the time and just a long history of winning. Michigan, maybe not in basketball so much, but as a whole, it's a really winning sports university. And then you've got little Loyola with Sister Jean. It gives everybody that roots for the underdog or is annoyed with the overdogs, it gives them somebody to root for and something to watch still.
Yeah, and this tournament has had a lot of great games, a lot of close games like that. And when you see those kinds of games, even though it wasn't the case last night, but when you see a lot of those games that Loyola has played in, it makes it even more interesting. So you're getting a pretty good dose of everything you kind of want. A team they can get behind if like your team's not in it. You're into the underdog thing, and you like close games. Granted, last night's wasn't, but the other ones were. So it kind of gives you overall the full package.
Yeah, it's super cool, and I think this is the furthest I've watched the NCAA tournament in years. Normally, I tune out after like the second round because, just like I said, there's usually not a huge underdog. You're not going to see, teams you never heard of pull the big upset. But now it's just like, you know what? I'm going to watch this Loyola team all the way till the bitter end.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty cool because last night I was at a bar with a bunch of friends. Some of my friends are in a band and they were about to take the stage when they were up by like, I don't know, was it like 15 or something at one point in the second half. So everyone was, really excited for that. And my one friend and I, we kept an eye on the score. And then in between songs, we'd shout a score update to our friends on stage and everyone around. And then we finally shouted Loyola won in between songs. And then everyone just broke out cheering. So it's not like you're yelling, oh yeah, Loyola won. And like one other person's like, oh yeah, cool. It's like everyone is behind it. I think that's what's so neat.
Yeah, it's neat. A friend of mine who's ever since I've known him, he's lived in San Diego, but he's originally from Kansas. He's a big Jayhawks fan, so he just like on Facebook posted Rock Chalk Jayhawk, And I just responded, I was like, you spelled Rambler up wrong. So hopefully, no matter what, is a number one seed is going to get knocked out, the next round, and there's going to be an underdog in the final, whether that's Michigan, who's a slight underdog, or a big underdog with Loyola. It's going to be a fun final.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Even if Loyola does lose, it was a hell of a run. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. I think we've said this every round, but it's going to be hard for Loyola. I think Michigan is a really talented team, and they're just starting to hit a groove. There was a couple games in this tournament where they didn't look so good, and they still won, but they're starting to hit their groove. And if it's going to be a tough one for Loyola, but I think we've said that against Nevada. I think there's been several games where we've all said it's going to be a tough one for Loyola, and they're still here.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can say this is legit going to be a tough one because of the talent Michigan has, but right now, hey, anything can happen, I'd say. I really think anything can happen.
Cold shooting night can change anything.
Yeah, and I think that one of the keys to them winning Loyola is they got to get off to another real hot start again. Kind of like what you saw in the last game. They got to get off to a real good start. You don't want to create any sort of big deficit against that Michigan team, because we saw it wasn't the last game last night, but the game before, I can't remember. Who did they blow out the game before? I can't remember.
I think there was only one blowout. It was Nevada was the blowout, and then it was my God, why am I drawing a blank? Let me pull up the bracket.
Well, either way, that one game that Michigan dominated, you don't want to get into that kind of pickle because they dominated and didn't look back. So Loyola's going to want to get off to a real good start in that one. I think they scored like 90-some points in that game. Michigan did.
Oh, Michigan's blown out a couple teams. They've looked real good.
It was the last one before last night. Yeah, I was talking about Michigan the whole time.
Sorry, I was thinking you said Loyola.
Yeah, no.
Why can't I just find an actual bracket that's up to date?
You would think they'd be easy to find.
I know. Let's see. Here we go. All right, so Florida State.
I got it. It was Texas.
Yeah, and then they beat Montana, Houston, Texas A&M, Florida State.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Texas A&M game when they scored 90-plus points and won pretty handily. You don't want to get into that kind of rut against Michigan early because they won't take the foot off the gas. They'll just keep on going.
And they got a lot of guys that can hit threes. And if they get a lead, and they're just going to start, they're going to try to pad that with threes. And that's really when things can go off the rail. But Loyola has been playing tough defense, and that's been, and it's not like individual efforts when you would watch, you watch some teams that have like a solid defender. They play good team defense. That's, teams that are, Loyola against Miami. Miami was a much more athletic team. Nevada, much more athletic team, and they're just playing solid fundamental team defense, and it's proving to be effective.
Yeah, you saw last night, I didn't see all of the game, but from what I saw, they were forcing their opponent to take some really bad shots because they were really locking down defensively. So, hopefully you could get some of that mojo still going in the next game.
Yeah. So what is Michigan? Michigan a 3 seed, the Loyola 11 seed, and then 2 number 1 seeds. So I'm so glad that the 2 number 1 seeds have to face each other to make it to the final.
I know. That's great.
Yeah, so should we transition over? Got a little bit of Blackhawks, some baseball, and some Bears talk. What would you like to talk next?
There are a few Blackhawks things I'm sure we could talk about.
All right. I mean, I guess the big one is Dylan Sakura, who was one of the Blackhawks draft picks in the 2014 draft. So if you're not familiar, if you have a player's drafted in the NHL and they choose to go to college instead of staying within the organization, once they finish their college career, there's a certain amount of time that the team that drafted them has to sign that player before they become a free agent. And Dylan Sakura went from a 6th-round draft pick in 2014 to arguably the Blackhawks' best prospect. And there was concern that he may not sign with the Blackhawks. And then, lo and behold, they wrap it up, and they signed him, and he's played his last college game just a few days ago, and he's going to be playing with the Blackhawks potentially this Thursday.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun transition, isn't it? You go straight from hockey to the NHL without any of those minor league stints. But yeah, he's logged 14 points in his first 7 games of the year, including 6 straight multi-point games to start the season, earning the Hockey East Player of the Month award in October. Also named to the Hockey East All-Tournament team, was Hockey East first team All-Star, helped the Huskies to their first Beanpot Championship since 1988, notching 4 points, 1 goal, and 3 assists. So yeah, he's pretty well decorated, according to NHL.com here, in his days in college.
He's also a finalist. He's also a finalist for the Hobie Baker Award.
Yes, he is.
Which is the award for the best college hockey player. And according to Brian Campbell, he was saying that he expects Dylan Sakura to play on the top 2 lines for the rest of the season, which will be some nice exposure. I mean, imagine him getting let's transition a little bit. The last game is Patrick Kane played first line center. So imagine a line with DeBrincat, Sakura, and Kane. That's got to be, for a kid, a week ago was playing with his college teammates, and then he's on a line with DeBrincat and Kane playing for the Blackhawks.
Yeah, it's just too bad it doesn't really mean anything this year, but for the future, it sure means a heck of a lot. He's going to be playing with one of the best scorers in the NHL and one of the best upcoming forwards in the NHL in DeBrincat. So these are the kind of things that make you hopeful for the near future. Obviously we'll see how he does in the NHL. It's not going to be a huge sample size this year. There are 6 games left? 6 or 7? Something like that? 6 games. Yeah.
Yeah, there's 6 games. But it's at least you get to see something.
Oh, for sure.
That's nice, rather than like being worried sick that he's going to sign with somebody else. But they got him under, and part of it is if the Blackhawks are trying to send a message to their draft picks that do decide to go to college, hey, don't sign away because you think you're going to get stuck in Rockford forever. Look at Dylan Sakura. We've got him from his last game in college to the next game he played was as a Blackhawk on one of the top 2 lines. Like that's sending a message that don't sign away. We have room for you and we have opportunity. And I think that's an important message because when guys do decide or when they finish college and they're deciding whether to sign with the team that hold their rights or wait a little bit and sign as a free agent, they want to find somewhere that's going to be a good fit. If there's if they're a top goalie, they don't want to be sitting behind an elite goalie in the AHL forever. If there's just no room for them to move up, or if there was room, they're going to be a bottom 6 guy. They'd rather have an opportunity to be a guy that's going to play and make an immediate impact.
Yeah, exactly. I think that right now it also says to me that the Blackhawks are ready to kind of do a young revamping very quickly. Like they want to get back into contention very quickly with a lot of these young kids, including DeBrincat, including Sakura, and a few other guys. And it's kind of funny when you look at the Blackhawks overall core, it's not old on paper. The defense is a little older, but you look at the forwards. I mean, Brandon Saad is still only 25. You have DeBrincat, you have Schmaltz, you have Sakura. I think one of the oldest forwards are like Taze and Kane, and they're just about to turn 30. So there is youth on this team. I just think that the big concern is effective defensive youth. But we have some guys in the system that can hopefully make a near impact. You know, maybe this really is going to be a short turnaround. Again, I really don't know, but you know, this may be sending a message that that's the intention, whether it works or not.
I'm hearing some rumors that the Blackhawks are going to go after some restricted free agents and try to sign guys or younger guys where they can still get them on a reasonable contract. Because typically the step is you get your entry level contract, and then you get your transition contract, and then if you earn that third contract, that's usually your big one. They're going to try to get some of these restricted free agents, and that way they're still younger, where they're ascending players, and they can still get them at an affordable rate, and that way they're not binding themselves up until they can get the Duncan Keiths and the Brent Seabrooks off the books.
Yeah, that's going to be the toughest thing, is doing that, but we'll see what happens there. Okay, so I was contemplating this just the other night. I don't know why I was thinking about it. This has to relate with the Blackhawks' near future, so I figured I'd ask you this. Let's say next year, the Blackhawks kind of do what we think they're going to do. They're going to try to get back to the playoffs. They're going to try to go after some of those restricted free agents. They try to retool within a year, use these young guys to also help contend. But we get the same results like this. And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying if that were to happen, then what would your approach be?
I think then you got to blow up the front office. I mean, I guess it sort of begs the question is, what do you think happens with coaching and front office between this year and next year? Are we assuming that Bowman and Quenneville are both back?
Right now, I'm assuming yes. That's going to be my guess. This is just kind of based on that guess. I'm assuming that they're all going to be back. I don't see Rocky Wirtz clearing house after one playoff miss. Maybe it's more warranted than we think, but I don't see it happening.
All right, if we're assuming that everyone is back and we do, try to rebuild on the fly with younger talent and still get poor results, then my next assumption is either Bowman is gone or Quenneville's gone.
Yeah, my thoughts are kind of like this. If we see something just like this next year, and let's say Corey Crawford is either playing but not playing a lot because he's hurt, or he's playing and he's just getting overwhelmed with a lot of the bad play and it's finally catching up to him, and you're seeing a lot of the same problems, I almost feel like at that point you'd almost have to say, we got to tear it down and start again. And maybe you don't tear down the entire roster. You try to build around like Schmaltz, DeBrincat, Sakura, and some of those young forwards you have. But I feel like with a lot of the roster, with the veterans, the coaching staff, the management, I feel like that would be cause for a complete overhaul, more or less. But I mean, obviously, that's just a scenario, and I'm not really sure if that's going to happen or not. Again, the hardest thing about the Blackhawks right now for me is that I don't know what is going to happen next year. We got to get through this offseason first. I thought that things were going to kind of turn a corner this year after a bad playoffs last year. That didn't happen. I'm just kind of preparing myself for different scenarios, and that's one of them because you never know.
It's a lot harder. I mean, in hockey, it's a little bit harder to tear things down. Same thing with basketball. Football's the one that's just easy to tear down.
You can tear down.
You can just cut people. They're not. Baseball's, well, depends if you've got any sort of talent. But if you've got guys like that have these albatross contracts and you can't do anything about it, like an Adam Dunn, then you're sort of stuck. Like you can't trade them, you can't cut their salary. You're just sort of stuck.
It's not as easy as football. I'll give you that.
Hockey is hard because most of your big money guys that you want to part with if you're going to tear things down have full no trade clauses, and if they don't want to waive it, there's nothing you can really do. You're sort of stuck with them. Pretty much anybody that's been rumored that the Blackhawks would like to trade, even if anybody was willing to take on those enormous contracts, which they're not, those players wouldn't waive their no trade clause. So it's a silly point because there's two absolute brick walls there that you're going to run into trying to get rid of them.
Yeah, I think that if you were to look at tearing it down in terms of hockey, I'm thinking more like front office and coaching. Obviously, players, you try to trade what you could, and I'm just talking about any scenario, not just specifically the Blackhawks. Obviously, you're going to be stuck with some of those guys. You can't restructure contracts or anything. That's kind of more what I'm talking about. Like I said, you try to build around the certain young guys and you trade what you could, even though it's really not much. We saw that problem this year. But yeah, I mean, my main point was talking about front office and coaching.
Oh, front office and coaching. If things go really awry and the fixes aren't working, then you're right. I think you part ways with Bowman. I think you part ways with Quenneville. Quenneville's going to want to gut it out and get more wins with veteran players, and he's going to fight for veteran guys. And you're going to want somebody that's going to be a teacher and a developer, and somebody that's got a style that's more up tempo and easier to learn. That's more defenseman friendly. And I think you're just going to want to completely move into a different direction.
Right. And again, this is just a scenario if things are like this year, because right now the biggest question is, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, is this truly the end of the road of this era, or is this just kind of a blip in the radar? I think you can make an argument for both, but when you make an argument for both, you basically just have a Venn diagram on your hands and you don't have a real answer, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And it's funny because I read an interview with Quenneville yesterday or day before, and he was acknowledging that they're not trying to tank, but they definitely are keeping an eye on their standings as far as the lottery goes.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess in a way that's kind of good that they're focusing on the future. But I don't really know how much they're looking into it or whatever. I'm sure they're trying to go out there and win. They're just not winning because they stink. I don't think they're throwing any games or anything. But when you stink like that, it's natural to look at your draft selection. So at least they're looking towards the future. I mean, at this point, you might as well just try to get the best draft pick possible, but they're not going to tank or anything, and I understand that. They're just bad.
All right. So in the standings for the lottery, the Bulls, I believe, are still 8th.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And
Tankathon.com will tell us.
Yes, and the Blackhawks are 7th. Who's going to wind up with the higher draft pick?
That is a wonderful question. Well, let's see. I think the first thing you got to do is gauge the separation, because right now the Blackhawks have one less point than the Islanders, who are 8th, 2 less points than Edmonton, who's 9th, and 3 less points. 3 less points than the New York Rangers. While the Bulls, let's see, we know the Bulls are not going to catch any of the top 3, because to do that, they'd have to lose out, and the other 3 would have to, they'd have to win 5 more games to match. That's not going to happen. I think, let's see, the separation, the Bulls are pretty much set at, they're 2.5 ahead of, okay, they're 5.5 games back of the 1. New York, the next seed, number 9, is 8, so there's a little separation there. They're half a game with Sacramento, and then 1.5 with Brooklyn. So, God, it's going to be so close. I just feel like the problem is with the Bulls is that they're bad, but these other teams are also really even more bad. With the Blackhawks, they could potentially bump up to 8 or 9 with just a few points swing, but I don't think they're going to get any worse than 7, because Montreal has 66 and they have 71. So I think they're going to be in the same exact spot. I think they're both going to be 8.
Who do you think is going to be luckier in the lottery?
No, that's a good question.
This is pure rolling the dice here.
All right, I'm going to roll the dice, and even rolling the dice, I don't know. Maybe I need to flip a coin or something. I mean, that's really what it is. Now, Tankathon.com gives you the chances, and keep in mind that the lottery odds are more of a guess on Tankathon for the NHL, because not all information is public, while the NBA, you pretty much know the chances. If you're going based simply off the chance that they give on Tankathon, just on that, the Blackhawks have the better chance.
But I'm going to think ultimately that the Bulls are going to try to trade up and use those 2 first rounds. So I think just going straight lottery, the Blackhawks and Bulls will have the same pick. I think they'll both pick 7.
Yeah.
But I think the Bulls ultimately will try to trade up a few spots and parlay those 2 first rounders into a higher first rounder. So I think ultimately the Bulls will pick at a higher spot.
And that makes perfect sense, especially where the teams are at right now, because the Bulls need as high of a pick as they can get because they're completely rebuilding. The Blackhawks, they want a good draft pick for the future, but let's face it, they're still going to try to contend, even though they had a really bad season this year. So the situation is a little different, and that's why it would support what you just said. So I can't disagree with any of that.
What else with the Blackhawks? Jonathan Taves is out with an upper body injury. You brought this up, I think, last episode or the episode before, whether I thought they should sit players for the rest of...
Yeah.
And I am now saying if Taves is healthy enough to come back, is you don't play him the rest of the season.
You just shut him down. What's the point of bringing him back? Just shut him down.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with Kane. Fine, play Kane the rest of this games.
Let him play with Sakura. That's a little more important.
Yeah, but Crawford, don't try to get him back. Taves, we'll just leave him on the shelf. And I mean, there's 6 games left. Just let them sit on and maintain their health and get ready for next year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Besides Taves and Crawford, is there anyone else you'd want to sit, or you think those are just the 2 guys you want to sit?
Those are the 2 guys I would want to sit. Everybody else, let them play. The young guys, we want to see more what they can do. Kane, because he's your best player that's still healthy, and you want him to have that leadership with some of the younger players. So
especially if they're going to be playing with him on a line.
Yeah. But the one, and Kane, like I said, was a first line center he was on the line with Saad and DeBrincat, and mixed results there. I mean, he had some good defensive plays. He scored a powered play goal. He was on the ice when Saad scored a goal. But he was 2 for 11 in the dot.
Yeah.
So there was some good and some bad.
Which isn't really surprising to me, frankly.
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. I mean, I don't think that would be ideal going forward on a winning team, but it was definitely interesting to see in a team that's just, mathematically eliminated at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a situation we're not used to being in. We're used to sitting guys at the end of the season because we're getting ready for the playoffs. Now we're just sitting some guys because we don't want them to get hurt because we're way out of the playoffs. And, by the way, they were officially eliminated with that one loss against the Avalanche. And that was a weird feeling. It's like we knew they weren't going to make the playoffs for months now, but seeing it officially happen, it was just a really weird and kind of empty feeling.
Yeah, it was the same way. I didn't watch that game. I woke up, I had something going on that night, and I woke up the next morning and I looked at the score, and I was like, they're mathematically eliminated, aren't they? And it's just like, some part of me, even though that I think you were reading the odds and it was like a fraction of a percent that they could make the playoffs, I was like, they still have a chance. And then once it was like, there's zero chance, mathematically eliminated, you're like, oh, that sucks.
I'm going to really miss looking forward to the first round of the playoffs like we have every year when you're just ready to potentially go on another cup run and it's really exciting and all that. And, now we're watching the Blues go on this surge. They're probably going to make the playoffs now. It just sucks. But the way I try to look at it is we had it so good for so long. Eventually the tide turns because in sports, with every rivalry, with every run, the tide always turns. Sometimes it happens in a few years. Sometimes it takes a decade. Sometimes it takes more than a decade. But at the end of the day, there will always be a turnover.
All right, so I have one more Blackhawk question for you.
Yes.
So Anthony Duclair was brought over in a trade. He's a restricted free agent after the season is over. Do you attempt to bring him back, or do you let him walk?
I mean, he wasn't bad, but he didn't really do all that much. I mean, the thing is, if you wanted to bring him back, he probably wouldn't be that expensive, right?
You would think not. And you're right. It was interesting is because he's got a lot of potential.
Yeah. The speed is good. I like the speed from him.
Like, yeah, he's probably, I mean, he could be the fastest skater on the team, or if not, he's up there.
Yeah.
So he's got, but then just everything else just hasn't caught up to that. And because he's African American and we're in a really diverse city, you hope that if you have him on your team and he does realize his potential, it could bring a new audience to the Blackhawks, because they could, the Black community could feel, hey, look, they've got a player that, is like me. And I mean, that's gotta be, if you're Rocky Wirtz, it's gotta be in your head as well, because it's a huge untapped market. I mean, people of every background go to baseball. People of every background go to basketball games and football games, but you go to hockey games, it's mostly white people.
Yeah, I definitely think that diversity is in their minds, and I think it's very important to them. And unfortunately, we had that incident earlier, and that not only the Blackhawks, but the hockey community is really big on diversity, which is a very important and good thing. So yeah, it's got to be on their mind. From a playing standpoint, if he's cheap, then maybe they do it. I know the salary cap's going to go up. They'll have a little room to play. But at the same time, they're bringing in more and more of these kids, and a lot of them are forwards. And I don't know, maybe there just isn't a space for him. If he played better, I think there would be more of an urgency to bring him back. But again, he didn't play bad. He just wasn't very productive. And yeah, there's got to be a point where you say, we don't really want to go with potential if we don't have to spend a bunch of money. We'd rather go with potential with some of these rookies and not like a restricted free agent. So I don't know. I kind of have my doubts that Duclair is going to be back. I'm not sure if he really fits this team going forward.
It's a shame because you did go out and get him, but you expected more, and he wasn't bad. He wasn't good, but he showed flashes.
Yes,
and you're like, oh, if you could just put this together. And it's got to be a little bit demoralizing if you made a point that you could probably get him for fairly cheap. But it would make you feel like crap if you let him go for somebody to cheap and he figures it out next year. And you're like, you just got to sit there and watch him. Wouldn't it be nice to have Teuvo Teravainen back?
Yeah, okay. I have a whole thing about him, though. To me, he never really fit with the Blackhawks. He never really fit with Coach Quenneville. He was going to accomplish things in another uniform, but I definitely see what you mean.
Yeah, it's one of those things that as a fan of a team, as the GM of a team, as ownership of a team, anybody associated with this team is, if you let somebody go and they do well, it's not that you have ill will towards them. You don't want them to do well, but you always want to see, if you let somebody go, you don't like seeing them do well from an ego's perspective. And it's happened a few times in the last few years, and it's never a good feeling. And I just feel like Anthony Duclair is a guy that you could bring back cheap. And if he's not performing the level that you want, you could play him bottom six. And, but if he's able to put it together like you hope, he's a top six guy, and you are made out like a bandit.
Yeah, I really wouldn't mind if they brought him back. If they do bring him back for cheap, I'd welcome it, because I think that he does have the potential there. It's not as certain. I mean, you look at his numbers with the Blackhawks, 23 games, he scored 2 goals and has 8 total points. Nothing that's going to blow you away. He had 9 goals with the Arizona Coyotes in 33 games. Last year, he had just 5 goals and 15 points in 58 games. He had his one good year, 15-16 in Arizona, 20 goals, 24 assists, 44 points. So it's not like he's had a bad career so far overall. He did have a good season, but this is right now it's his 3rd full season. It's technically his 4th in terms of service time, but he played 1 game in 2015. 18 games. He scored 1 goal in 18 games in 2015, but that's still nowhere near a full season. He's still pretty young. He's 22 years old. So yeah, like I said, I could see him maybe coming back, but most of me says I don't think he will.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Stan Bowman, you've got to basically say, this is what we're willing to pay for him. And if he goes above that, you let him walk. And if he signs for that or below, then you bring him back. I think it comes down to strictly financials with him.
Yeah.
What's the risk potential valued in dollars?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well. because obviously the salary cap make things difficult. I just can't help but wonder if there's also a concern about him fitting with the team, because so far he hasn't been as productive, even though he, I think, is a talented player. There's always a question if a player fits in with the team, and I just can't help but wonder if the Blackhawks and the coaching staff may or may not think that that's the case, if he does fit in or not.
To be fair, this has been a terrible year and nobody really fit in.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue that.
If this was the Blackhawks were playing well and competing, does Duclair play better?
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing about Duclair is that if you look at his career, he's played on bad teams. 2 years in Arizona, and then another half year in Arizona, and then the 2017-2018 Blackhawks. He's played on some pretty bad squads.
Those are not the squad goals that you want.
Oh, not at all.
All right. Should we switch over to football?
Sure.
All right. So there's not a ton in Bears dumb per se. We've got, I think I've got a few questions from people asking about Cam Meredith. I think that's probably the big focus.
Okay.
And last week when I was going through what the depth chart would be and what the probable starters would be at this point, I penciled in Cam Meredith on the outside opposite of Allen Robinson. And, right now he's made official visits with the Colts and the Ravens. And I think people are starting to get nervous that he's not going to be back with the Bears.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that too. I think a lot of people are concerned about that because, yeah, we got some good receivers in free agency, but we've kind of been relying on Cam Meredith to be there as well because I don't think we could really rely on Kevin White at this point.
But here's my thinking on the whole thing is Cam Meredith was a restricted free agent. So the Bears basically had 4 options that they could do with him. They could give him the first round tender, which means that if anybody signed him away, the Bears would get that team's first round pick, but they would be a 1-year, $4.15 million contract. They could give him the second round tender, which means if a team signed him away, the Bears would get the team's second round pick, and that's $2.915 million for 1 year. There's the original round tender, which means if another team signs him away, you get the pick in the round that player was drafted in, and that would be worth $1.9 million. Or you can just let him go and hit free agency outright. And the Bears decided to do an original round tender, the $1.9 million for 1 season. And Cam Meredith, if you remember, was undrafted.
That's
so
right.
If a team signs him away, you get absolutely nothing. Hold on one second. We got fuzzy again. What is going on this week? So the Bears decided to go with the original round tender. And if you remember, Cam Meredith was an undrafted rookie. So that means the Bears would get no draft compensation if somebody were to re-sign him. But I think Ryan Pace, and we saw this with Kyle Fuller, I think he's being really smart about how he's going about re-signing his own players. People were saying, well, what's the point of signing Cam Meredith or tagging him with the original round tender because you don't get anything. But the one thing you do get is you get the right to match the contract on the offer sheet that he gets from another team. So it's basically a last resort is you get to see what the other, It's like if you're playing a game of poker and you get to look at the other guy's cards and decide whether or not you want to go all in. And that's really what it is. If you were to do a second round tender or a first round tender, basically you're saying to another team, you got to give me really good draft compensation. And I don't think any team would bother to offer him anything. And so you will get Cam Meredith at either 1 year for like roughly $3 million or 1 year for roughly $4 million. And sure, they got the money to do that. And sure, you guarantee he comes back next year. But as Bears fans, what's the reason we're so worried about Cam Meredith leaving? It's because we saw that potential and we think he's going to have a big year next year. And if he does that and you brought him back on a 1 year deal on a restricted free agent, then next year he's an absolutely unrestricted free agent and you got to pay through the nose. Wouldn't you rather have a team tender him for 3 year, like $8 million deal and have him wrapped up for 3 years rather than 1 year for, $1.9 million and have to worry about signing him next year?
Yeah, I didn't really know how his contract worked, but the way you just described that really makes Ryan Pace seem more and more smart to me because, like everything you just said, you're essentially doing, comparing it to the Kyle Fuller, it's the ability to match. And the fact that they have so much cap room, it makes matching that pretty easy. So those are some pretty comforting words for people worried about losing Cam Meredith.
Yeah, is a big knock that fans have had on Ryan Pace is they say he bids against himself in free agency. And this year, he's been so smart and so ahead of the curve. And he said, hey, I'm going to let the market set your price and then pay you what everybody else is willing. So now there's no way anybody can say he overpaid for this guy or that guy because the market was set by another team. And if Cam Meredith is not able to secure a deal, which, the beauty of it is either the Bears get him again for $1.9 million for 1 year and have a whole nother year to negotiate something, or the fact that he was hurt last year, and another team's going to offer him less money and he's going to sign a deal that's underpaying him and the Bears can just match it. It's a good situation for the Bears. And I think Ryan Pace has figured out the game and is starting to play it really well.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, the way you put that all, it kind of put my mind at ease too, because like I said, before you explained all that, I really did not want to lose Cam Meredith. I'm pretty high on him for the guy he's going to be. He's obviously not a traditional number one, but he'll be really good depth on a team that now has Allen Robinson. And besides Allen Robinson, you don't really want to rely on Kevin White because of the health issues. So, yeah, thanks for those words.
Yeah, I was a little nervous at first, and I started just thinking about it rationally as a rational person rather than being a Bears fan. And it was just like, this makes sense. I don't.
And those don't always match.
Yeah, they rarely match up. But I'm like, the only way the Bears wouldn't match it if somebody was paying Cam Meredith like $6 million a year or something, and who is going to pay a multi-year contract for like $6 million a year to a former undrafted rookie who had one good year and is coming off of an ACL, MCL injury? That doesn't seem realistic.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I have a strong feeling he's going to be back. We just hope it's on a multi-year deal rather than the 1 year tender.
Yeah. Ditto.
What else with the Bears? They re-signed Sherrick McManus, which I think we all saw coming. He was probably their best special teams player. So you bring him back. But they cut Marcus Cooper, and then they brought him back on a cheaper deal, which is weird that they didn't. I think this goes again with most teams would have just made him restructure his contract and take him less money. But the Bears let him walk, and they let him see what the market was, and then brought him back on a reevaluated market deal.
Why did they even? That's okay. This is a legit question. Why even bring him back? I didn't want him back.
I don't either. And I actually have the note here, my notes for the show prep, that he's very likely to be cut depending on the draft. I think he is basically insurance, so they don't have to take a cornerback high in the draft. They're basically he's somebody that knows the system, somebody that has played in it, not very well, but he has played in it. And if push comes to shove and they're not able to bring in any other cornerbacks that they're happy with, then they've at least got a veteran there in the system. But most likely they will bring in a draft pick, and probably a fairly high draft pick. I would imagine that they're going to go either first, second, or third round with a corner. And
I could see that, yeah.
And that guy's going to replace Marcus Cooper fairly quickly. So I think it was just I mentioned it last week, is the Bears put themselves in a position where they're not having to draft out of need. They will be able to draft best player available. And Marcus Cooper is part of that. They had like no cornerbacks going in, and they brought back Bryce Callahan. They brought back Prince Amukamara. They brought back Kyle Fuller. Now they have Marcus Cooper. So now they've got basically their whole defensive backfield from last year. And so if nothing changes, they feel very confident with going forward with that, where Marcus Cooper is just going to play if somebody gets hurt, or if they have a weird package, he's not going to play much. And if things go well and they get a defensive back in the draft that they're very happy with, then Marcus Cooper gets cut. And I think that's the thinking there. I doubt he's going to be on the Bears roster on first game of the season.
That's fair. I mean, I still don't really want him back, period, but that's fair. I get it.
So I think the last thing I wanted to talk with the Bears is I've been pulling up the big boards on Sports Illustrated's big board, Draft Tech's big board, Walter Football's big board, Matt Miller's big board, just to kind of get an idea of who they're thinking the top 10 talent is. And I was matching it up with the current top 10 draft order, or top 8 draft order. And, we went through this before, but I'm really starting to look at it, and it's shaping up very well for the Bears. It really is.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
There was one wrinkle in it that I think is going to be a little bit less advantageous to the Bears, but ultimately I still think the Bears are in a good spot. The Giants traded away Jason Pierre-Paul, which means that they're most likely going to draft Bradley Chubb. We were thinking that they were going quarterback all the way. But it makes me think that they're like, well, we're going to take Chubb. So that's a little bit of a bummer, because I was hoping for some sort of miracle where he fell and the Bears could move up and get him, because he's the best edge rusher in this draft.
And it's probably our biggest need right now, or one of our biggest needs, is an edge rusher.
Yeah. And a lot of people say that even if he would have come out last year, Chubb probably would have been, the guy that Cleveland drafted. They said that they would have probably drafted Chubb over him. So he's good. So that would have been nice that, he dropped down to like 5 or 6, where it was reasonable for the Bears to move up and take him.
Yeah, that would have been nice. Believe me, that would have been nice. Because it's not like we could solve that problem through free agency, because there's not a lot of really effective guys out there. So I get that. but I still do think that the Bears could play this draft to their advantage quite well.
I mean, they can still. So here's how I started mocking it out as of right now, barring any new trades, is Cleveland going Sam Darnold, number 1. Giants taking Bradley Chubb at number 2. The Jets going with Josh Rosen at number 3. Cleveland coming back around and getting the guy that they wanted at number 1 overall anyway, and Saquon Barkley at number 4. Denver at 5 going with Josh Allen. And then Indy goes with Quentin Nelson, the guard from Notre Dame. And Tampa's the wild card because there's a lot of whereas they can go, but I think they're going to go with Darwin James, the safety.
I've seen a lot of mock drafts with saying the same thing.
So that leaves the Bears at 8. They get their choice of Denzel Ward, who is probably the best cornerback in the draft. Minka Fitzpatrick, who is he can play any defensive back spot, but he's probably going to wind up being a safety in the NFL and arguably the best safety in the draft. Tremaine Edmonds, who is probably the most physically gifted linebacker in the draft. You could put him as the middle linebacker next to, in the place of Nick Kwiatkowski, and he would start right away. Or you can beef him up a little bit and put him as the outside linebacker and edge rusher. Roquan Smith, who is a traditional inside linebacker. You could plug him in day one. Marcus Davenport, Joshua Jackson, or you could go offense and get the best tackle in the draft in Connor Williams, or the best wide receiver in Cortland Sutton or Calvin Ridley. So you could have the best corner, the best safety, the best wide receiver, the best offensive tackle, or you can move back and collect draft assets and still get one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that happening too. The only thing I really don't see happening is them drafting a wide receiver with that pick, that first one. I just don't see it.
I don't either, but I'm just saying
possible,
that's who's available. You've got the world there, and I know the teams give up the most to move up to get a quarterback, but if you can recoup any sort of draft compensation, like let's say you're like, I would be happy with Minka Fitzpatrick, Denzel Ward, Tremaine Edmonds, or Joshua Jackson, and somebody you're like, I would be happy with any of those 4. Then you go, well, you know what? I can move back 3 spots and guarantee I'm still going to get one of those guys. And you get maybe a 3rd rounder back. If that's how, you're not going to get the same bang for your buck as if somebody's trying to move up to get a quarterback, but somebody's moving up and they're desperate to get a guy, they'll give up draft assets. And that's, this is shaping up where the Bears can make some moves and hopefully still get a really good NFL player. And they still have some cap space left. They're still in the top 10 in the NFL,
which is
cap space
really
available.
amazing.
They've got $28 million in cap space left, and they've got a rookie salary pool of approximately, it hasn't been fully announced yet, I don't think, but it's estimated to be about $7.5 million that they'll be allotted for the rookies. So they'll still have over $20 million left to spend come wave 2 of free agency.
Yeah, it's a really nice thing to have, and that's what happens when you're a young team like this trying to build up. You look at a lot of veteran teams out there like the Packers who are pretty tight with the salary cap, and they're trying to figure out ways to plug holes and have the ability to pay Aaron Rodgers when that needs to come. So this is a nice little thing to have for the Bears.
And you know what my favorite thing about the Bears right now is? That nobody on their team got arrested for assaulting a 66-year-old paraplegic man.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that's just, wow. When I saw that, I shook my head and immediately thought the NFL is not going to give the appropriate punishment. You know it's not.
No, it's not. And I don't know what happened or how it happened. And apparently a police officer witnessed the whole thing and didn't do anything about it. And
that's even worse.
It's such a weird situation. But then you're like, well, it's one of the Bennett brothers involved. So of course it's a weird situation.
Yeah, that's sad but true. I'm sick of those two. I really am.
And they're both such talented guys, and they're
not good people.
They just get themselves into the dumbest situations.
Yeah. Whether it's dumb or dumb and bad. And this is both dumb and bad.
Yeah, it's a bad combination.
Yeah, it really is. It's a shame.
All right, let's wrap this show up with a little baseball talk, because the baseball season starts this week. We are less than a week away from opening day, which should be a holiday, and we should all get off of school and or work.
I agree.
Is there any surprises with what the Cubs, their final roster is?
Overall, no. I think that I was a little surprised that Caratini got the gig over Chris Jimenez. But then again, I'm also thinking that Caratini is going to be kind of a key guy for the future when it comes to having another young catcher / first baseman even. Obviously, he's not going to take over Rizzo, but having that kind of versatile guy that can switch hit is going to be kind of important. So they want to get him fairly consistent playing time behind Wilson Contreras. I wasn't surprised that they were carrying 8 bullpen guys like Joe Menz said they would. My guess is going to be Eddie Butler is going to take Justin Grimm's spot. Not surprised Peter Borges was cut. So overall, nothing really too shocking.
Yeah, that was my note, is the Caratini over Chris Jimenez. And not saying, if you're going purely on talent, clearly Caratini is a better player and on the rise in his career, as opposed to Jimenez,
Sure.
Jimenez, who's on, his rounding the last corner of his career. But my two thoughts were that Caratini is a young player, and that you're probably, if it comes down to having to make a trade, he's blocked by another young player that he's going to be somebody you want to move, or could move. And you want to see him have as many at-bats as possible and get as much playing time as possible. And if he's playing behind Wilson Contreras, Wilson Contreras wants to play every single day. And you're not going to get Caratini as much playing time as he's going to want or as he deserves as a young player. Whereas Chris Jimenez, as he's been a backup catcher for however many years,
His entire career.
Yeah, basically, I don't think there's ever been a year where he started or been a regular starter. And so he's been a career backup, and he's a guy that can just come in off the bench and pinch hit if need be. He knows what it's like to be a personal catcher, and he knows what it's like to be a backup catcher, and that mentality. And he's a veteran, and I think in a young clubhouse, that's going to be beneficial. So from that perspective, I was a little surprised, but Caratini is an upcoming player.
Yeah, right, because we've seen the importance of the veteran catcher going back to David Ross with the scheme. You had David Ross, then you had Rene Rivera last year, who actually did a pretty good job, and you even had Miguel Montero, even though things were kind of ugly at the end, he was still considered a veteran guy and very important on that team, though Montero was probably the more productive veteran guy. I guess right now, you just kind of got to say, Wilson Contreras, he's entering his 3rd year as a big leaguer. Outside of Yu Darvish, he's worked with all these, and Tyler Chatwood, but he's worked with John Lester, he's worked with Kyle Hendricks, he's worked with Jose Quintana. He knows the pitching staff overly well in regular season games. He got a chance to play with them in spring, all of them in spring training. And with some of the years under his belt, you just kind of got to say, hey, Contreras, you're the number one guy. We need to trust you to be a veteran guy at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what their thinking is. But it would, that choice of Caratini over Jimenez it's not utterly shocking, but it was a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is Jimenez, once, I think based on the way the contract is come June, if he's not on the major league roster, he can ask for his release and be granted it. So it's basically you're just casting him off.
Yeah, I kind of got a feel for him, but that's kind of part of what this all is. It's not like Peter Borges, where the minute they sign him to a minor league deal, I'm like, yeah, he's either going to be up with the Cubs like for a few games late in the season, or for when someone gets hurt as like a late defensive pinch runner guy. But I never thought he was actually going to be an essential part of the club, where Chris Jimenez, I thought there's your next David Ross type guy. So those situations were a little different.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
And this is not one I've, where I'm posing it as conversation starter. I really don't know. And I don't know if I have any thoughts on it, but it's pretty clear that Ian Happ has won the leadoff spot
for opening day.
And
yeah, for sure.
If he is successful, does that force him into that spot day in and day out? And if it does, how does that alter the playing time and the rotation in the outfield or the infield if they have him playing second? How's that going to affect playing time for other players if he's successful at the leadoff hitter spot and gets the spot daily?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is going to depend also on what guys like Albert Almora Jr. do, because if he's doing well as well, you have multiple reliable guys, and I guess you would just kind of have to select which matchups you think would be best. Obviously, it's even more complicated because it's not like you're just going to play righty-lefty matchup, because Ian Happ is a switch hitter. He can hit from right and left, so there's a little more to it than that. But Ian Happ may have the opportunity to go from utility platoon man to like a legit starter. And Albert Almora seemed like that was going to be the solidified guy, but with the way that Happ is showing things, like you said, that might change things a little bit. That's a tough question to answer. I mean, here's the thing. Happ can play in many different positions because he is a utility man. So that does include right, that does include center, and I don't know if he's played left or not last year. He may have a little bit, but when he was in the outfield, he was mainly center or right. And then in the infield, he was greatly a second baseman. And the infield, the middle of the infield's crowded enough as it is, because you got Baez, Zobrist, Russell up there. Even though he will play a little bit in that area, it's probably going to be more outfield than infield. The thing is, Almora's bat is going to play a lot into that. Not as much Hayward, because I really don't think Hayward's going to be anything more than an average hitter at this point. I want to be wrong, but he hasn't really shown it to me yet. This is a really tough situation to tackle. So I think it's not just what Happ does. It's going to be what a lot of guys do around him as well.
All right. Let's say Almora hits for 305. He's hitting, right around that 300 mark. And you have Jason Hayward putting up numbers like he did with St. Louis. And you've got, Bam Bam, and he's hitting 265, but with a nice on-base percentage and a good home run rate. And Ian Happ, is hitting 280 with a 350 on-base percentage. What do you do?
Oh, isn't this a great problem to have?
And does if that happens, does that basically force Ben Zobrist to the bench most days?
Well, I did want to talk about Ben Zobrist later in the show, but we'll kind of weed him into here right now. I think it's pretty safe to bet that Ben Zobrist is going to be a bench guy. I don't think there's any question about that. I'm not as worried about him getting everyday play because I don't think he's going to get everyday play regardless. So I think it's more of a thing between Hayward, Almora Jr., and Ian Happ. Schwarber is going to be in left. That's going to be his main spot unless there's a really tough lefty on the mound. The way I could potentially see it is, you remember the splits that Almora Jr. had last year and kind of in his career. He absolutely destroys left-handed pitchers. If that kind of trend keeps up, then maybe you kind of go based off the platoon of, okay, lefties are starting on the mound, you're going to put Almora in center. If it's not, you can go with Ian Happ. That may be more of a platoon in that sense. Like I said earlier, Happ's a switch hitter, so that makes it a little harder. He can bat left and right, but if you weigh the options and say, I think that Almora Jr. has a better chance of hitting this left-hander even more than Ian Happ, though he can bat right-handed, you might go that route. And if you're facing a righty and you feel like Happ's got the good left side of the plate with the power bat, then you play him. You might do matchups like that, even though he is a switch hitter. That's just a guess. That really is just a guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, and odds are it doesn't go that smoothly for you. But it's an interesting thought because it's not like you're saying, oh, what if this player does something that's completely out of the norm for them. I'm saying, what if Jason Hayward hits like he did the year before he came to the Cubs? What if Albert Almora puts up the numbers like he did in the second half of last year? And
which were really solid numbers for not having a good walk rate, just saying.
Yeah, and what if what if Kyle Schwarber hits like he did in his rookie year and in the playoffs? Or the first 2 years of his playoffs, and you're like, that puts you in a good tough spot, but a tough spot indeed.
Yeah. Now the thing with Jason Hayward is it's tough with him because I know at the end it's not our money. We don't care about what he's getting paid, but you would think that you wouldn't reserve Hayward mainly as a late inning defensive guy for what you're paying him. You're trying to pay him to be an overall contributor to the club, even though his bat really hasn't come around yet in Chicago. So I still don't think the opening day lineup is projected to have a minute, and overall, I don't think they're just going to start having Hayward as mainly a bench guy. You're going to have to work around Jason Hayward with this. You're going to have to look at center field and say, Happ and Almora, you're going to try to squeeze them in as much as you can, while Hayward is going to be in there for a majority of the time still, even though it may not be every day like we once thought. He's still not going to be reduced to like just a bench guy, I don't think. So that's a tough thing to work around as well. Even if he's not hitting that great like he has with the Cubs, I just don't see them just benching him permanently. I don't see it.
I agree. I really do agree. Even if he's hitting atrociously like he did his first year with the Cubs, I feel like they're still going to want his presence there on the field, not just sitting on the bench.
Right. And I think that Hayward is going to be a guy that's, even if he's not hitting great, he's still probably going to be, I'm like 99.9% sure if he's still a regular player, he's going to be another Gold Glove finalist, maybe another Gold Glove winner. And when he does get on base, he'll be a really good base runner like we've mentioned on the show before. It's just going to be hard if he's not hitting well, but you still want to use Happ and Almora, who could potentially be hitting well, but you don't want to always take Hayward out. It's just a very tough situation.
Absolutely. And hopefully Hayward is able to turn it around and force the issue and make Madden have to make a tough choice on who to play and not make it easy by batting miserably and having it be Hap in center and Almora in right and Schwarber in left.
The nice thing about Ian Happ, and I will say this, his versatility allows him to play in so many places. So you could see him playing most days, just not at the same position. Because let's face it, if there is a tough lefty on the mound, there are going to be days where Schwarber is going to be on the bench, not starting. And if you could put somebody in left like Almora, then you could put Happ in center. If Schwarber is playing and there's a really good right-hander on the mound and Almora struggles against righties, then you could put Happ in there as well. But let's say you want to give Javi Baez the day off and you want to put Zobrist in right one day and give Hayward a day off, you could put Happ at second. So at least there's versatility with Happ, and he's not just one position, one player.
I mean, it's not just his versatility. Is Almora has versatility. He can play all three outfield spots. Hayward can play right and center. And so you have three guys who can legitimately play center field. And you've got multiple guys that can play corner spot. And you're right, Hap can play second as well, which, if Javi gets injured or if he goes on one of those strikeout rates is, you can easily put Hap in at second and be comfortable enough. I mean, he's not the defensive player Javi Baez is. Not too many people are.
No, it's hard to get that level.
He's okay. he's adequate.
Yeah, exactly. He's not terrible, but Javi Baez, that's very, very hard to match. I wanted to get into an article I wrote with Cubby's Crib this weekend. I don't know. Did you get a chance to read that?
I saw the headline and I have it actually open on another tab on my computer, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
Okay, so I'm going to basically sum it up and talk about it. I'm sure you seeing the headline gives you a pretty good idea of what it's about, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
So the headline that I wrote for it was Ben Zobrist's contract still worth it in the end. So long story short, Ben Zobrist signed before the 2016 season, 4-year, $56 million deal. Last year didn't do very well, 232, 318, 375. As we mentioned just moments ago, there's a lot of depth on this team and a lot of positions that can be played. And at this point, it looks like Ben Zobrist is going to be reduced to a bench guy because of Javi Baez and Ian Happ and so on and so forth, all the people in the outfield. It's going to be a crowded team. Zobrist is here for this year and next year, and he may seem like dead weight. And sure, he may be past his prime. He's 36. He's had wrist issues. He's showing signs of age. He's probably, for the most part, washed unless he surprises us again. But despite all that, the contract was 100% worth it because of what he was brought in to do. The main goal for Ben Zobrist was to help them win the 2016 World Series. And you know what? Not only did they do that with him, he batted .375 and was the World Series MVP and had the most important go-ahead hit in the history of the ball club. So it's one of those things where you were paying for multiple years of one ultimate goal, which you accomplished. Obviously, they want to sustain contention. They want to keep winning world titles. But when you really think about it, Ben Zobrist was the missing cog, or one of the missing cogs, to a World Series team, a team that they were trying to get there for the 2016 season, and they did. Now, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that overall opinion.
I fully agree. They signed him to do one thing. He got it done. And I'm a little more actually excited about the position he's in of being a bench player, utility player, because of something else you mentioned. The wrist injury, the back issues. Those are two things that are nagging, and he's an older guy. And I'm not going to call him old because I'm older than he is, but is baseball old, is you need time to heal those things, and they're nagging. So if he's a guy that isn't having to play every day, then he's going to be more fresh when he does play, and he's going to be able to give you better at-bats, better play when he is playing. I mean, the guy is like, 2 seasons ago was the MVP of the World Series. So it's not like he's that far off removed from it. But you're right, he's not going to, with Javi Baez, with Ian Happ, he's not going to be needing to play as much. So when he does, I still think you're going to get, as a pinch hitter, is because he's a professional hitter. It doesn't matter what spot in the order you put him in. It doesn't matter what inning you put him in. It doesn't matter if he's been sitting on the bench for 2 weeks. He's going to come in there and give you the same quality at bat. And imagine if it's late in a game and some other guy is pulling, Joe Schmo, the scrub that has never been good, and to be a pinch hitter, and the Cubs are able to pull Ben Zobrist off to be a pinch hitter. Like that's a really good spot, and it's going to be a healthy Ben Zobrist because he's not playing every day.
Yeah, I mean, the guy still draws walks and has good at-bats. And also last year, he slashed .333, 400, 556 as a pinch hitter. So he was a good pinch hitter last year. And also, if you remember, there were some key games that the Cubs won late where Ben Zobrist, he didn't drive in the winning run, but he got on base to score big runs late in games. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all the points you just made. Being more fresh off the bench, I think that he'll be kind of really fully focused when he does get his at-bats, even if they aren't every day.
Yeah, I'm actually excited about it. It's the Cubs aren't forced to do anything, to put a Band-Aid over a guy that struggled last year. And last year was a year where they sort of needed him to play more. Because Ian Happ hadn't ascended yet, and you had Addison Russell injuries, and you kind of had relied on him more. This year, you don't expect to have to rely on him, and I think having him be fresh and coming off the bench is you're going to see a different guy, and it's going to be really good. I think he's going to be a difference maker for the Cubs this year, even though he's going to be a bench guy.
Yeah, obviously you want good bench guys. You need those different roles to be filled, and who better than Ben Zobrist, the guy who doesn't have the durability anymore necessarily, but is still a pretty darn good hitter in terms of at-bats that he gives. And think about this spring training. Now, this stat's out of date. This was first 10 games. He had a 192 average, but still a 300 on-base percentage, which is over a 100-point difference. So it still goes to show that he's having good at-bats and drawing walks. And I mean, look at last year. A 232 average with, like, an average on-base percentage. Like, yeah, 318 isn't anything to brag about, but when you're batting 232 and you could still put up that kind of on-base, it does mean you're still drawing some walks there if there's quite a difference. So he'll still give you those good grindy at-bats, which is what you want. So I'm like you. I'm excited about what he can do in a more limited role, because having a guy with a limited role with a resume that he has, it's pretty good to have. Let's face it, if you'd rather have Peter Borges or Ben Zobrist as that type of guy, you much rather have Ben Zobrist.
Yeah, I mean, think about the last playoff game that they clinched against the Washington Nationals last year. Is when that game gets tight at the end, don't you want a Ben Zobrist coming off the bench to give you a quality at bat to try to get a runner on base? Isn't that the guy you want on there?
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a professional hitter, especially in the playoffs. He has had a really good run overall in the playoffs. Obviously, like I said before, the go-ahead double he had, but yeah, his overall numbers may not look great in the playoffs if you look at all 7 series, but he also didn't hit very well in some of the early seasons he had with Tampa Bay when he was younger. But look at the run he had in Kansas City through the NLDS last year. So we're talking right there. We're talking, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 series. throughout most of that time, he did a really dang good job at getting on base at the right times. In the ALDS and the ALCS in 2015, he batted over 300. He batted over 300 in the World Series. Not as pretty in the NLCS in 2016, but, he still contributed a little bit. Same with the NLDS. He had some big hits in Game 2 of that year. So, his overall stats may not be eye-popping, but you look at basically the past few years in the postseason for him, he's done some pretty good things.
I have one last Cubs question for you.
Yeah.
The first week of the baseball season, the regular season, what's your one thing to watch with the Cubs?
Did you say the season?
No, the first week of the regular season.
Oh, first week of the regular season. Okay, sorry, I thought you meant spring training.
Oh, no. So if you include just the regular season, this first week, what's the one thing you're watching for?
I think how the bullpen can hold up, because it looks like Brandon Morrow is going to be our closer, but he's a guy that doesn't really have closer experience. I think that overall this bullpen is vastly improved, but the thing that we're lacking compared to last year is having a definitive closer. Last year we were lucky to have not only a definitive closer, but a top 3 closer in baseball in Wade Davis. We may have more pen depth this year, but the definitive closer is something we don't necessarily have. And I'm not saying Morrow can't be the guy, but being a closer these days especially, it's a different mindset than being an 8th inning guy or a 7th inning guy. So there may be some adjustment time. There may be call to say, hey, maybe we should go with Steve Cishek, or maybe even a guy like Strope or Edwards Jr. So I think that structuring is going to be kind of important. Also in the bullpen, I want to see if Brian Dunsing really is a good reliever, or if he just had one good year, because I kind of have that feeling that's what it is. But overall, I would say it's the bullpen. I think the run scoring should be fine. I love where the starting pitching is right now. They had a great spring. It's the bullpen.
When I thought of this question, I started thinking what would be my answer. And originally my thought was going to be, what does Lester look like in his first 2 starts? And then I was like, who's he going to be pitching against? And it's looking like he'll pitch against Miami and Cincinnati. I'm like, that's not really a fair representation. So if it was going to be that start against the Brewers, then maybe. But I'm like, all right, I'm not worried about John Lester against Miami and against Cincinnati. So I'm going to throw that question out, and I'm going to say, what does Jason Hayward's at-bats look like? Not the results. What do his at-bats look like? How is his swing looking? That's going to be my thing I'm going to watch first week.
Yeah, that's a good thing to keep your eye out for. I think if I'm looking position player-wise, that would be one of them. Another one I'd add is Kyle Schwarber. Is he going to get off to a hot start? Is Albert Almora going to get off to a good start? Is Ian Happ going to be doing what he was doing in spring training? I'm not really too worried about Bryant or Rizzo, really. I'm not at all. And also keep in mind that Bryant typically starts really slow the first few weeks, and Rizzo the same way. So if they start kind of slow again, I'm not going to really worry about it. I'm not going to be too worried about them. But really a lot of the outfield is what I'm looking at. I think most of the infield is pretty much going to be where it's going to be, except though you kind of hope to see if Russell can get off to that big start.
Yeah, but I mean, I like, it sets up nice that they have two on paper easy series to start the season. Miami, which is just a decimated team, and Cincinnati, which is like a hitting instruction park for the Cubs. So you get those 2 series under your belt, you get a couple days off, and then you go to Milwaukee before you really start the season off. It's a nice jog to start the season.
Thing is, they got to take advantage.
Oh, they have to.
They really do have to take advantage.
They have to be in the lead in the division after the first two series. They just need to be.
Because is the Cincinnati series a 4-game or a 3-game? I know Miami's a 4-game.
Cincinnati, I believe, is a 3-game. Let me pull this up. Cubs schedule. I had it open and then I closed it.
Because I know it's a 10-game road trip to start.
Yeah, so it's a 4-gamer against Miami, and then it's a 2-gamer against Cincinnati.
Oh, that's weird.
Then it's a Wednesday off, and then it's a 4-banger against the Brewers.
Okay. The way I see it is those first two series, I think if you win 5 of those, you're in good shape.
And you got to expect they should win 5. I mean, that's anything less than that, and you're probably disappointed, right?
Yeah, I mean, in Miami, I think that anything less than 3 out of 4 is kind of disappointing. I would like a sweep. I think a sweep would be possible, but in baseball, I could definitely see the Marlins stealing one. That's just kind of how it happens. And then I think with the Reds, at worst, you split that one. If they split that one and they win 3 of 4 from Miami, I think that's perfectly fine. And then with the Brewers, it's really early on in the season. I think ideally you'd like to win that series, obviously, but okay, here I think would be a perfectly acceptable scenario. 3 of 4, split.
I mean, honestly, when you're the team that, I think the Cubs are in a better position to be playing a 4-game series against the Brewers than the other way around, because the Brewers, they lost out to the Cubs last year. They're the ones that are chasing 4-game series. You feel like in your own ballpark to start the season, you feel like you need to win at least 3 out of 4. And if you're the Cubs, if you split that 2-2, that's a victory for you. And it's to sweep a 4-game series is darn near impossible. Not impossible.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's very, very, very hard. And I would say, if you pull statistics, I would say most 4-game series are split 2-2. That's the most likely outcome. And so, I mean, the Cubs have statistics on their side, and that's still the better team. And I think it's going to be rough for the Brewers, because mentality wise, they're going to want to take at least 3 of those 4 in their home ballpark.
Yeah, I think the pressure definitely will be on them, even though it is like the 3rd series of the season. But I do think that it is important for the Cubs to take advantage of those bad teams early on, the Reds and the Marlins, because you don't want to be chasing like you were last year. You don't want to fall behind. You want to get off like 2016. They got off to a hot start that even a little slump mid-season didn't mean anything because they were way ahead. You want to get way ahead right off the bat. I think that's really important to do. And this is the perfect opportunity to do that. But yeah, 6-7 wins, I think, in the first on that road trip, I think overall would be pretty satisfying. I think 7 is a really solid number. Anything less than 6, I think, would be a little disappointing. Overall damaging, no, but disappointing.
All right, so switching over to the White Sox to wrap this up. We have our White Sox rotation at this point now. It's James Shields, Lucas Giolito, Miguel Gonzalez, Reynaldo Lopez, and Carson Fulmer. Does Michael Kopech, he was a one that was probably the most exciting minor league pitching prospect. I don't think too many people thought he was going to make the roster, especially with service time things. But does Michael Kopech's last awful outing make you nervous if you're a White Sox fan?
Let me look at.
And that was it was a bad start, and it went from bad to worse.
I have to kind of look into it. I think obviously there's always a little concern when it's a young kid like that, but at the same time, playing in that kind of environment in spring training where things are just kind of, you're just trying to get a feel for everything. I'm not sure it's that damaging. I think that obviously it can worry some people naturally, but I don't think it's something that I'd overly panic about in the long run. I'm looking at his spring training stats now. He got off to a real good start, and then things kind of went down. He's going to be sent to the minors to start, obviously, and I think that if he has a good feel there, then he'll be up pretty soon. I'm not pressing the panic button yet, but I think there's also reason to say, hey, if we need to take a little more time to work him into the majors, there's no need to rush him. Right now, his ERA is 11.57, and that probably blew up with his last really bad outing. I don't know exactly what it was. Do you have those numbers in front of you, his outing?
I don't, but he definitely gave up a grand slam. It was it's a bad start. My saving grace is Lucas Giolito.
He's looked incredible,
and I finally heard my first interview with him, and I really like him. Like I am a Lucas Giolito fan. Plus, his grandpa was an actor on Seinfeld.
Which one?
He was George's father-in-law.
Susan.
The one he was married to that died from Susan's dad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he's a big Larry David fan. Like he was talking about how much he liked Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he's like a film buff, and he's very articulated, and like he speaks well, and it's like not just like the baseball jargon, but he's actually in depth talking about things, and he's able to like spin it off and talk, comedy and real life things, and you're like, man, I can imagine just having a drink at a bar with this guy, just shooting the shit. It's like I like Lucas Giolito. I'm excited about this guy now.
Yeah, and the way he's really kind of adjusted his game, putting great movement on his pitches, causing a lot of real good deception. I saw his start against the Cubs. He looked really, really freaking good. I think that he might be right now, out of that starting five, the most promising going forward. Obviously, you're going to wait and see when Carlos Rodon comes back, if he ever really does come back. Carson Fulmer at 5. A lot of Sox fans tell me that they don't think he's going to be a starter in the long run. Frankly, so far, his overall career hasn't looked all that great, but you can't always blame him for that because they poorly managed him in 2016. But he's still young, so I wouldn't really give up on him yet. But I think that it could still be fair to say that he's going to be a bullpen guy primarily. And Michael Kopech, I wonder, is he going to be a bullpen guy or is he going to be a starter? I think this is now the time to find out when he finally gets up here. But yeah, you got your innings eaters in Gonzalez and Shields. Right now, looking at the rotation right now, Lopez, Fulmer, Giolito are going to be the guys that you're really going to focus on stat-wise.
Yeah, and the funny thing is the when Lucas Giolito came over in the trade, the Adam Eaton trade, Lucas Giolito at one point was a Nationals really high, promising prospect, and he lost favor with the organization. And their GM is not known for losing trades, so you really started thinking, all right, when does the other shoe drop with Lucas Giolito? But you're watching him now, and you're like, he's just getting better. Is it they misevaluated him, or is it the Cub or the White Sox farm system pitching coaching? Is it them that coaxed the best out of him?
Yeah, I think they just kind of adjusted his game because you saw the struggles with him with Washington, and there was some question about the velocity of his fastball. And I think that he's relying more on kind of this movement type pitch. To me, it's just an adjustment. And I think sometimes when you're really working hard to develop a prospect like him. Because let's face it, when the Washington Nationals had Giolito, they were already contending. The White Sox are trying to groom him as best they can because they're rebuilding. So it was probably just some sort of adjustment made. That's my guess.
Plus, you cannot. There's a lot of things you can knock the White Sox about, but as an organization from minors up, they've been pretty fantastic at developing young pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, they've had Cooper there for such a long time, and he has the reputation that he has for a reason, so that's worked out pretty well. I mean, look at Chris Sale, look at Jose Quintana. So that gives you a lot of promise for guys like Giolito. I think the worrisome thing about Michael Kopech is just the style of how he pitches. You know, it's always worrisome when you have a guy that pitches the way he does, but if they keep him healthy and they have him reach his full potential, he's going to be really good. Where Giolito, if they work with his mechanics still and they're doing what they're doing right now, then that's a really good pitcher you could be developing for a long time, someone who could be more durable. I mean, you look at the differences in small sample sizes in the majors. With the Nationals, he had a 6.75 ERA. With the White Sox, he had a 2.38. So quite a difference there.
Yeah, I mean, my big concern with the White Sox is that they're on this trajectory of being a really, really good up and coming team. My concern is that who's going to be that veteran pitcher that comes in and puts them over the top. You looked at Houston and they made a trade with the Detroit Tigers to get Verlander, and Verlander was the guy. The Cubs went out and paid big money for John Lester, and John Lester was the guy. Who's going to be that guy for the White Sox? Because I don't see them going out and signing that person. Are they going to have to be? Is it going to have to be a trade for the White Sox?
It's probably going to have to be. And I mean, the good thing for them is they have all those prospects. So if they need to pull off a trade, they have the items to do it.
They do have a lot of trade pieces that they can make.
Hey, if the Rays want more prospects and they like Chris Archer, there's something you may think about.
Is Chris Archer, though, the guy that's going to put you over the top?
I don't know. I think he would be a big addition when they're contending potentially, but let's face it, he doesn't have the postseason resume that John Lester has or that Justin Verlander has. But I still think he'd be a pretty good option to help bring in there if the time were right. I mean, that really is a good question. It's also going to depend on who's available on the free agent market. Will they spend like you asked? I'm not as sure. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. It's also going to depend on where there are pitchers like a John Lester or Justin Verlander on teams that potentially won't be contending. So there is a lot of question about that. You're definitely right. I don't have a definitive answer. I have a few thoughts, but I really don't have a definitive answer.
And it's funny because we're looking at the White Sox starting rotation for this season. James Shields, Lucas Giolito, Miguel Gonzalez, Reynaldo Lopez, Carson Fulmer. Not that impressive right now. I mean, at starting five, definitely not a top 15 starting rotation in baseball. But then it makes you think back and you're like, all right, well, what was the Cubs starting rotation in 2014? So 15, they made it to the NLCS. But 2014, the year before, that 1 year before they made that big leap, can you name the starting rotation for the Cubs?
Let me try to do it off the top of my head before I look at Baseball Reference. So it was Samardzija, Edwin Jackson. I think they traded Matt Garza already. So it was Samardzija, Jackson. They eventually brought in Kyle Hendricks, but it wasn't on opening day. Boy, I gotta think. 2014. Don't tell me anything. It was Arrieta didn't start because remember he was on the disabled list, so you can't really count him for opening day, though you could count most of the season. Sheesh. Okay, Travis Wood. Travis Wood was in there, so was on opening day was Samardzija, Jackson, Wood. Arrieta was hurt. Hendricks didn't come up yet. Oh yeah, Jason Hamill.
Yep.
Because they signed him at the beginning of the season. And 5-starter, was it Carlos Villanueva?
Yep.
Okay.
So here's the pitchers that started more than one game for the Cubs that year. So they had to start at least one or more than one. Travis Wood, what led the team in starts.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Edwin Jackson was second. Then Arrieta. Then tied was Hamill and Samardzija. And then after that was two pitchers tied for the most starts. It was Kyle Hendricks and Tyoshi Wada.
Tyoshi Wada. That's a blast from the past.
Then it was Jacob Turner.
Oh God, that guy.
And then Carlos Villanueva.
Yeah.
And then the last two guys that started more than one game were Felix DeBrant and Dallas Beeler.
Dallas Beeler. I remember Dallas Beeler. Felix DeBrant. I remember him as, I thought he was a reliever. I remember the name. I just don't remember him starting.
Got 4 starts.
Huh.
And then the other two guys who started it all were Eric Jokish and Dan Straley.
Oh, Dan Straley. Didn't we get him in the Samardzija deal with the A's?
I believe so. But you look back and you're like, dang, that's a pretty rough group of starters. That's a hodgepodge group of starters there.
Okay, let's look at those starters and compare them to the White Sox and match who's who. We can.
All right. Well, Edwin Jackson is James Shields.
Got it right off the bat. The definition.
Then Samardzija would be Miguel Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, except at least yeah, I think that's as close as you can get. Samardzija was really good in 2014, and Miguel Gonzalez was meh. But yeah, I can agree with that.
I would say, man,
there's not really a Jason Hamill on it right now because
there's not Hamill.
Maybe Gonzalez is closer to a Hamill.
Maybe.
Veteran guy, wasn't originally with the team because Samardzija was a long-time guy that they were going to center around, while Hamill was a veteran bring-on, while Gonzalez was also a veteran bring-on.
But then it's tough to match up anything else because Reynaldo Lopez is 24.
And he's part of their future.
He's part of their future. Lucas Giolito is 23 and part of their future.
Giolito, you can kind of consider him a Kyle Hendricks in a way. Maybe.
I mean, as far as not their pitching style, but their, I guess where they're at in the career.
Came over in a trade. And then, Giolito's ceiling now wasn't as high as Kyle Hendricks when we got him, but if you look in the long run, the effectiveness that he might have could be at a Kyle Hendricks level.
And then Carson Fulmer is 24. So it kind of ends right there with the comparisons, but you're missing those cogs. I mean, it would have been a lot easier to do if Hector Santiago got the nod as the 5th starter over Carson Fulmer.
Yeah, I really thought that Santiago was going to be in that rotation somewhere, but I guess they kind of want to work him in. They want to work Fulmer in there instead.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not, this is not the rotation that you want if you're the White Sox once you're ready to compete.
And it's not going
to be. I mean, the Cubs rotation, changed drastically because Kyle Hendricks got a lot better. Arrieta, was pitching fantastic. You brought in a number one guy in John Lester. And you actually had a really good season out of Jason Hamill that year. So it's, it's a lot different, and you're gonna see that be a lot different as well for the White Sox. Once you're out of that burden of James Shields' contract, you'll have 3 young guys in Lopez, Fulmer, Giolito. You'll probably flip, especially if Carlos Rodon comes back healthy. You're probably going to flip Miguel Gonzalez at the trade block or the trade deadline. And you'll have Kopech, and you've got some other young guys that you're going to be able to, but I think you just need that one stud guy that's either through a trade or through free agency that you're going to have to overpay for, but that's going to,
that's part of it.
That's going to help you go over that hump.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got 2 more White Sox questions and we can wrap this up.
Okay.
1, does Avi Garcia finish the season with the White Sox, or does he get traded?
It's going to depend on a lot of how he does. I think if his value is really high, but they think that they can get something really good in return, they may trade him. Because he's 26 now?
I
or so?
think so. I can double check.
So he's not old. He's shown a lot of growth the past year. We'll see if that holds up or not. And I also think it's going to depend on where they think the rebuild is, because if they think they can get this team into contention really quickly and that he could be a valuable contributor for them, then I think they keep him around. But let's say they still think they're a ways off and they want to get some more value from him, young prospects, and they don't feel like he's going to be really part of the future, then they trade him. I think the chances are more likely he's still going to be with the White Sox than not being with the White Sox.
I think he ends up being with the White Sox because if he's hitting well, they're going to want to keep him because he's showing that it wasn't just a 1-year fluke. But if he can't hit, his trade value is going to be terrible anyway, because teams are going to be like, all right, well, he sucked every other year and was good 1 year, really good 1 year, but then he sucked again this year. Why would I want to trade for that? So I think ultimately he's going to end up sticking with the White Sox.
Yeah.
And then my last question is Renteria the man? Is he going to be the man that brings the White Sox when they're ready to compete? Is he going to be the manager, or are they going to have their own Joe Madden in mind?
I hate to say it, but I think that they're going to have their own Joe Madden in mind. I know that Rick Renteria has built a lot of good chemistry with these young guys, but if you ask me, I think that Rick Renteria is a great coach. I think that he's a great mentor for young kids, and he does that all very well. But when it comes to managing in big games, I just don't know if anyone has seen enough of that to really rely on it. That's kind of the same attitude I have with Fred Hoiberg, is that I think he's great for coaching kids, but when they're contending and they're older, I don't think he's the right guy for that. And right now, we just don't know enough about Renteria. We've never seen him manage in a big game or a big situation, really. We've seen his bullpen management be kind of weird with the Cubs. With the White Sox, I don't really know what it's been like because their bullpen's overall been bad with him. so that's kind of difficult. But, overall, I just can't really see him being the guy when they're prime contenders. Maybe he will be, but I just think that if it's going to be like the Cubs, or if an opportunity rises for them and they're just getting into their prime contending years, they're going to pounce on a veteran manager that has proven to win big games.
See, I'm a big Renteria guy, and when the Cubs let him go and brought in Joe Madden, on one hand, I was excited because I saw the potential of what they could do under Joe Madden. But on the other hand, I really, really like Rick Renteria, and I think he's a very, is he the best as far as being a cerebral X's and O's kind of guy? No. But think back when the Phillies were so good, a few years ago with Rollins and Howard, and who was their manager? Charlie Manuel.
Shoot. It was Charlie Manuel, yeah. For some reason, I was thinking Mike Scioscia. I'm like, no, that's the Angels. Yeah, Charlie Manuel.
Charlie Manuel was a country bumpkin. When he first took over the Phillies job, he didn't even know how to do a double switch. Didn't know how to do it. No idea. Screwed it up every time. I lived there when they brought him in. People were miserable. They were like, what is this guy? And you know what? He was able to take this team and make them into a powerhouse. Sometimes it's in baseball, maybe not in other sports, but in baseball, sometimes just being that character that people will rally around is enough. And I think Renteria is a guy that people just love playing for. And I think these young kids are coming in and they're looking up to him. And when they're ready to play, they're going to look at him like a father figure, and they're going to want to play hard for him, like they were playing Little League under their dad as a coach. And I think that's going to be the key. I look at Renteria as being the guy that can do it.
Yeah, maybe he is. Maybe he is. I'm not saying he can't be, but I think if I were to place a bet, if they had somebody great available, they might try to pounce on it. I'm glad the Cubs did it, and I liked Ricky in his 1 year overall. Like I said, did I like some of his managing? No, but as a coach, he really brought Rizzo and Castro back, because Dale Swain he was just awful in so many different ways. But I really liked overall Rick Renteria's attitude. I still really do like Rick Renteria. But, I mean, I was 100% hiring Joe Madden. Don't get me wrong. There's something that just tells me that Rick Renteria is not going to be there during their prime contending years. Even though you hear Ricky's boys don't quit, I think the White Sox, these kids, they love playing for him. And I think he loves managing them. There's just something that tells me that an opportunity is going to come around and they're going to want to take it because they saw how well it paid off for the Cubs, that they'd want to try to emulate that same success. That's going to depend really on who would become available, because it's hard for another Joe Madden to become available, but I could see that happening.
Here's my ace in the hole. If Jerry Reinsdorf is still alive, that team is loyal to a fault with managers. Yes.
That is true. However, I also want to add that Rick Hahn has completely kind of washed away a lot of those qualities that they've had overall. I mean, he's revamped everything. So I don't know if they'd really have that same mentality just for that reason. Obviously, if they wanted to stay loyal to him because he's doing an amazing job, then yeah, that's one thing. But I think the blind loyalty, they're kind of past that at this point, with the way Rick Hahn has control of that all.
Well, that's all I really have for this show. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
No, not really. Thought we had a good show today.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening. Please check us out on social media, Twitter at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. However you listen to podcasts, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or the TuneIn app, please hit subscribe, share with your friends. Thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go berry.